takeaways from the movie. You liked it a lot.
I did. And I find Goldblum to be very charming in the second half of this movie.
Wait, in the second half?
Yeah.
When he's a monster?
Yes.
When his flesh is falling off and he's like a part puppet? We should have unpacked that a lot more.
Be afraid. Be very afraid.
This is Midnight Local, and I'm Greg, who's tired and has a sore throat, but I'm talking anyway.
And I have some work going on in my basement, so I apologize for any hammering that I cannot cut out.
Also, that's Meredith. She forgot. I steamrolled her so hard she forgot to introduce herself.
Yeah. I am Meredith.
Not my wife.
No.
Do we still have to say that? That was like a thing for a while.
I don't think so. I think if someone comments it, other people take care of it for us at this point.
Thanks, you other people, you.
Thanks, people.
My favorite people, Meredith, are people.
Not flies.
No. Oh, Brundle Fly, the reference. Nicely done. Yeah, we're talking about The Fly, which came out in 1986. David Cronenberg film, famous for body horror in his early cinema, and later famous for, I don't know, history of violence is the only thing I can think of.
Cronenberg is just a name that I know because it's used as like,
sure,
this is like a Cronenberg movie, or it's like used to describe movies a lot.
Kafkaesque.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I wasn't very familiar. And this is my first time watching The Fly.
How exciting for you and all of us. Background. Cronenberg is a horror director from Canada. I would say horror director because the beginning of his career certainly was horror and sci-fi-ish horror. Kind of broke through with, I guess, Shivers, but I've seen Rabid. I saw Rabid. That's the one where the girl becomes a zombie with a mouth in her armpit and her zombie brood take over the world.
Oh, I didn't. I kind of love that.
Yeah, it's
Brood
because of a.
Is when I've
I didn't
heard
see
of
The
his
Brood,
lot.
yeah. And I have seen Scanners to the extent that I was able to stay awake through it. It was not for me.
Well, and he shows up in a lot of movies. Like he has a separate career as an actor.
Yeah, exactly. And then also characters who look like him, like the doctor scientist boy who is played by, I forget his name, in Stranger Things, is definitely modeled after the appearance of David Cronenberg.
Oh, the man, the white-haired scientist.
Yeah, what's the actor? He's a famous actor. I'm forgetting
is.
his name right now. Shit. So The Fly, 1986, body horror movie. Gina Davis.
Just for people out there screaming Matthew Modine into the microphone. That is.
Oh yeah,
that
Matthew
actor
Modine.
name.
Right. Thank you. Yeah, Gina Davis, Jeff Goldblum, and other guy. That's
John
the
Getz.
Cast. John Getz. You basically have three people.
It's those
in this
three.
Movie.
It's.
There's some
100%.
like people in a bar.
Yeah,
Tawny.
right. There's the woman that he brings home from the bar and
Tawny.
the guy whose hand he snaps. We already said we weren't going to do this, and we're already doing it. We're going to walk through the movie this time. We're going to do it, get it out of the way so that we can talk about whatever we want for the rest of this episode. That is my new rule.
I think I can walk through it really fast. Am I allowed?
Yeah, I'll inject if there's something that you miss. One thing about the guy in the bar, he was like a famous wrestler or something. That's just something worth noting.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That is cool. I didn't know that. Jeff Goldblum is a scientist who's going to change the world with his teleportation machine that he calls telepods. Gina Davis is the sexy science reporter who writes for science journals.
Particle magazine.
Yeah, competitor to Nova magazine. And she is interviewing him, decides to make like a whole documentary project about him and his work.
Okay, you're really going to go through it like real fast.
You said we got to get it out of we got to do it.
We can get a little more specific. In that opening scene, it kind of drives me nuts that you start in the middle of their conversation. She makes it very clear to him that she has other interviews to do in the evening and is interviewing him. And then when he shows her his invention, he shows her the teleportation. She's like, I'm a journalist. And he's like, what?
Yeah.
That drove me crazy.
That is awful. But since you brought it up, that introduction, the first line in the movie is, to me, the best part about this movie. I love the way this movie opens. I almost wonder if that was the idea that made the movie.
What was
because
the first
to me,
line?
It's my work. You want me to tell you about my work?
Okay.
Well, it's going to change the world.
Okay,
and
is
he just
the
says
opening
it
line.
straight into the camera.
Yeah.
And And then you cut out into the over the shoulder, and I might be, I'm paraphrasing the line honestly, and I'm paraphrasing the camera directions, but then you cut out into the subjective realm. Or the whatever, yeah.
Right. You jump into like an action that's already happening.
It's
You're just
wonderful.
like throws you right on in. Yeah, I do like that a lot.
And first act and second act are intermingled. It's a very good first act because I don't think you realize you're watching a first act until the turn that brings us into the second act. It does not feel like exposition really, even though it's very direct exposition. This is my invention. I am a scientist.
Yeah, but it is like, okay, it's going to go wrong, but how is really unapparent. There's not a ton of foreshadowing how it's going to go wrong.
No. I mean, it's worth noting it was a remake from a movie from 1958.
Sure.
And so to some extent, there's a segment of the audience that knew how it was going to go wrong.
But from what I understand, it's very loosely, like, it's like the very main plot points is what remains and everything else is pretty different.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the movie from 1958 is like a schlock horror film on the level of like the Mant or the 50-Foot Woman or something like that. You know?
Scientist turns himself into Fly.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
That's it. It was like a B movie for matinees for kids to scream at. Mom and dad drop them off in the movie. No, anyway, so they have a very inappropriate relationship that quickly breaches professional divides where he decides that she can follow him around and cover him. This decision is reached at the grimiest burger joint I've ever seen in my life.
Well, she's trying to write her story. Her editor, who you find out that she's had a previous relationship with, is not taking her seriously.
And why would you?
Yeah,
she seems to just have former relationships with every man she encounters for more than 5 minutes.
Well, there's only 2 in the movie.
That's a 100% ratio.
I know, but there's like
the movie does not bother to put men into this movie that she does not have sex with.
There's 3 people in the movie. It's a love triangle. Like, that is the movie.
She doesn't have a friend. He doesn't but
yeah, they're all very into their work. Yeah,
I get it, but I don't think any film has failed the Bechdel test harder.
He's slept with both women in the movie.
Both of the females who appear.
It's just there's not a lot of people in the movie, so it's like it doesn't really matter.
There aren't a lot of people, and
which is great.
I mean, okay, let me. That's another point. So anyway, he accidentally uses his teleportation machine to turn himself into a fly. Why? Because she goes back to meet with her boss and former lover. He gets jealous. He gets drunk on champagne and decides, I'm gonna do it tonight. Baboons be damned, tests be damned, and I'll be the teleported man.
Well, and to explain baboons be damned, the reason that this is anxiety-inducing moment is because the problem with the machine up to this point is that it's been fine at transporting inanimate objects, but anything of the flesh is, the baboon is just turned inside out. It cannot handle.
The first baboon.
Yes, the first baboon is turned inside out.
Yeah, and the steaks don't taste good either. That's like a thing.
Yeah, and then they figure it out. They get a second baboon through. He's gonna send it for tests to make. Well, he says, what's the line? She says they're like having sex, and she says the flesh drives women crazy or something like
your
that.
Your flesh makes me crazy. I want to eat your flesh.
And then he decides the solve for his problem is to make the computer go crazy by flesh or driven crazy by flesh.
I will drive it crazy by the flesh.
Which, do you know what that means? Do you? No, it doesn't matter.
Neither does David Cronenberg. David Cronenberg had a vague concept of what a computer was at this point, I think. I genuinely, and like the computer itself is also like the prop is it is a garage's like computer diagnostic tool for working on cars. It has standing and typing at like a vertical keyboard has got to be the I mean, your arms, the carpal tunnel. I can't even imagine.
So he's going to send the successful baboon out for tests, but gets drunk and decides to just throw himself on in there.
To prove what a man he is I always want to call her Sigourney Weaver. It's not. It's
Gina Davis.
And that's because it's not because I associate them. It's because of some kind of auditory processing issue where those names sound very similar to me.
Oh, sure. But there is a quality about them that is similar, I think.
Oh, yeah. I think that they could mostly play each other's roles. I think Gina could have done Ghostbusters. I don't think she could have done Alien.
She's too sweet. She comes across as too sweet. And then as soon as I say that, I think of Thelma and Louise. But she's also very sweet in that movie, which is what makes their turn interesting.
Oh, and I guess she could have worked with Ridley because they worked together. So, I mean, maybe she was on the short list at one time. Who knows?
Okay, so he has seemingly successfully transported himself.
Yes, but immediately we know something has gone wrong. A fly was in there. We see it right away. It's not like a surprise or
Buzzing
anything
around
like
the room. Yeah,
Oh,
that's...
yeah. And you
get
see it get scanned, and I think you
Yeah.
even see the computer say, like, visually it merges them or something like
Okay.
that. Also makes a lot of sense, right? There's so much science problems here. People are going to be like, Greg, that's not the point of the movie.
Yeah.
I know
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
not the point of the movie.
It's not the point.
I know.
He throws a bunch of reasons in there, and it's kind of like a bunch of possible explanations, and you get to sort of pick your poison, because he cuts himself and they make a moment out of it. And that's where the fly starts to come through. He like gets something stuck in his back and she pulls it out, and he has like an open wound on his back.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
And
Yeah, because
that-
when he goes in, he does get scratched, and then the fly hairs start
earlier
growing
when they're
out of
having
before the teleportation, the scratch happens.
Yes.
And then after the teleportation,
that's
fly hairs are
where
coming
the
out
fly
of the scratch.
hairs start
Yeah.
to come out of.
Yeah, exactly. So he turns into the fly. The fly is a horrible monster that consumes him. At first, it makes him feel great. He is like a super crack cocaine man jumping off the walls.
Doing
Can't
giants.
stop fucking.
He's a gymnast.
Oh yeah, he's doubled as they bring in a gymnast to double for him, and he does impossible physical feats. She's like, "You ever do that before?" He's like, "No." Which I
He's
love.
just like running on the ceiling, basically.
I love. Not only did I did not have the strength previously, I also now have the skill.
Yes. The chaotic nature of him from that moment on is incredible.
Yeah, and then he turns into a horrible monster. She gets an abortion. She has a nightmare about an abortion.
She never actually has the abortion. She has a dream about having it.
Oh, right, because he breaks the window and
That's right.
escapes with
she
her.
goes to the hospital. He takes her. He tries to merge all three of them.
That becomes his mission, is
Mm-hmm.
to, he's like, I can become more human by merging with more humans.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's going to combine him,
and the baby.
Yeah, yeah. It's weird that he doesn't take ex-boyfriend as a sacrifice, because he doesn't like him anyway.
Well, the ex-boyfriend comes to his apartment with a shotgun intending to kill him, and he dissolves his hand and his foot with his vomit.
With his magic spit.
And so he's there, but also the boyfriend, Stathis is his name. He has a very interesting arc to me, because you go from annoying ex/editor, she says he was like a professor, they got together, whatever, to nasty kind of stalkerish jerk trying to
dude.
steal her story.
He is insanely evil.
Very jealous.
Like,
but
just
then,
shows up in her apartment and she's like, get the fuck out. No, give me back my key. I'm keeping it.
which is kind of a great
crime.
Yeah. But it is a great way to establish their relationship. They do it without telling you much, right? Like him being in there taking a shower, you're like, okay, I kind of get they were in a relationship for a period of time. Then he takes another turn at the end once he sort of sees the video of Brundlefly and understands sort of the weight of the situation.
Yeah.
He becomes very sympathetic to me again after that. Like he turns to someone who's trying to help her, and it's not sexualized. Like it is very just sort of, we have a problem. She is pregnant. She does not want to carry this pregnancy. He is doing his best to help her out. And he becomes, again, sympathetic. Yeah, so let's go through the ending, and then there's a deleted scene that sort of continues that point.
I didn't know there was a deleted scene. Anyway, ending of the movie. Brundlefly abducts them, and then he's going to merge with her and the baby, and then creepy McRape boy, now hero, gets her out of the telepod. He merges with the telepod instead. He emerges from it as a hideous beast, and has her shoot him in the head. And to me, hilariously, she looks at this nightmare flesh metal horror on the floor and is sobbing, saying, no, I can't, as if it's like still got anything to do with Seth Brundle at that point.
Well, I think the metaphor of the movie is aging, disease, like your loved one, addiction. Obviously coming out in the 80s, a lot of people tried to make parallels to AIDS, which is there as much as anything else is there, as a thing that exists.
Cronenberg was pretty explicit. And I'm glad you brought that up, because he was like, when people said that to him, he was like, oh, really? I was just thinking about me getting older and not liking it.
I think that's exactly right. I think, look, if you're making a successful horror, I wouldn't push back on what people see in it
no.
because that's the point.
Definitely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if that is the anxiety of the time, a successful movie will bring that forward. But he did not do that with intention.
That's subtext.
Yes,
He
exactly.
didn't know what he was thinking about.
Yes, exactly. So I think there's a moment where he is not fully transformed yet, but looking pretty disgusting. And he has vomited on his food and like all of this stuff. And he even looks down and he's like, oh God, that's disgusting. And she gives him a hug. And it's like, it took me aback when she did it, but it also, I think, is really important
Don't
because
get any
it's
of
like,
that on me.
she loves him. Like, she really cares for him. And it's very sad what is happening to him and watching him. I think she can attribute all of his bad behavior to this transformation, to this thing taking over. And so for as much of the movie as she's hoping she can help him and bring him back.
Yeah.
When she realizes she can't, it's a death. It's very sad.
That's true. And the other thing too is that like and I'm realizing this now, we're watching it with the understanding that like he is becoming this is a horror movie. He's turning into a monster.
Yeah.
That's the monster in the movie. And they both relate to it as I have a disease and I'm dying, and it's a grieving process instead. I don't like that.
You don't
actually.
like what?
I don't like, now that I'm putting that together, I don't know, is that dramatic irony? I don't like that we are watching this guy turn into a monster, but the character's experience is that he's sick and dying. To me, that makes it like kind of like it's missing its mark in a way. Like it's, I don't know.
How? Yeah, I think that is the mark.
Interesting.
I don't give a shit about any of these characters without that.
Without what?
The loss, the sadness, the desperation to try and save yourself. I will never turn into a fly, but I will experience disease. So that's something I can relate to.
Sure. No, how can I put this? It's not like a literary crit commentary. It's a film crit commentary. The movie purports to be a horror film, right? Like, and we can say that, like, you know, looking contextually at like the body of work that Cronenberg has made, he makes horror movies. Like the movie he made before this is a zombie movie. Does the movie succeed as a horror film if only the audience knows it's a horror film? I don't know how to I don't know how to verbalize this properly. If even at the end of the movie the monster isn't a monster for the people in it to some degree, like, I don't know. Maybe I've lost the plot here. I slept like 3 hours at most last night.
Well, he is a monster. I think that's why she ends up actually being able to shoot him. If he's not, then she can't. And she eventually does, because she knows she can't save him. She has to give up on him. He's been taken
really
over.
Putting him out of his misery at that
also,
point, right?
that is true, too. But
she never shoots him, like, you know, out of defensiveness or fear or whatever. You know what I'm saying? Like,
it's a loss of hope because she can't
It's
save
Dracula.
him. Yeah. Interesting. How so?
It's Mina Harker, who is Mina Harker, or is it Mina or the other one? I forget. She is in love with Dracula to the end, and the big brash cowboy dude whose name I forget has to essentially force a rescue on her. It's been years since I read Dracula, but I'm not mistaken, that's kind of it. And that's sort of the same thing here, where like our jerk off, you know, scumbag character is kind of a cowboy. He's like the literary version of the ultramasculine man, you know?
He gets the shotgun and goes to save her. So yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
The deleted ending, she wakes up from another dream where she's sort of giving birth to this butterfly and wakes up next to Stathis in bed, which what you were saying earlier when we started this episode, she's with, she goes back to him. I don't need that. I don't want it. I'm glad it was deleted.
What a young male's fantasy. I could be a scumbag and then rise to this impossible occasion and save her from certain doom, and then she'll love me.
Also, like, are you driving home? Well, I guess if they knew there was going to be a sequel or thought there might be a sequel, to say like she's still pregnant might be don't forget she's pregnant at the end. There's more to this story.
Well, there was a sequel.
Yeah.
But it wasn't directed by Cronenberg. So I take that to mean that Cronenberg was not planning a sequel.
No, the sequel was directed by the guy who did the makeup,
the creature effects.
Yeah.
Not uncommon in the world of horror.
Chris Wallace, which I think is important. He also did the Gremlins, and I think they won the Oscar for this movie for effects, for makeup. Talented guy.
Impressions of the film, what you think?
I really liked it. I love this movie, I think. I have never really understood the Jeff Goldblum fixation. His way of handling turning into the Fly, his sort of chaotic comedy and dealing with his anxiety through humor in this movie is very grounding to me for someone who's always talked about as a character who's very weird and hard to understand. I like his performance a lot. Yeah.
I didn't catch that whole humor thing, but I think that everything should be treated. Every character in every movie should treat pretty much every scene as if they're in a comedy, no matter how dark it is. And I don't mean like the way, like, you know, an action movie. Well, actually, that's great. When there's stupid one-liners in action movies, that's fantastic. I love it. But no, I mean, like in real life, like you're probably always trying to lighten the situation, and you're probably always trying to be funny, and you're probably always trying to be cool and relatable and stuff like that. And for some reason, drama as a genre amongst a certain set has, like, you know, the Oscar baits or whatever has kind of become like, no, these are serious characters. These are serious characters doing serious things. They are mirthless people. And that's not fucking real. And it actually, to me, takes it way out. I'd much rather see a comedy, quote, do drama than, you know, a drama do drama.
Yeah. Like a couple of moments come to mind. He's like climbing on the wall and he's like, have you seen this? And he like lifts up his shirt.
Oh, look at this. What's this? I don't know.
By the time she comes back to him, he's been sitting alone in this for a month. And his brain is just sort of like a mess.
Fly brain.
Yeah. And like he had this line that goes on for so long. And I was like, what are we getting to here? And actually it's up. I have it up where he says like, he tells her you have to leave now and never come back here. And then he goes, have you ever heard of insect politics? Neither have I. Insects don't have politics. They're very brutal. No comparison. Oh, no compassion. No compromise. We can trust the insect. I'd like to become the first insect politician. You see, I'd like to, but I'm afraid. And he's just rambling. And she just looks at him and says, I don't know what you're trying to say. And it's like, I don't know if I've seen a lot of scripting like that, where it's like,
I love that
he's
monologue.
Off on another planet.
Yeah. I love that dialogue. Actually, that line is fantastic. It's one of my favorite moments in the movie. And it's actually, you almost have to replay it because it is so fast and so kind of garbled that it's kind of hard to parse. You know, that might be the most horrifying moment in the movie, because you're right. Like the rest of it does feel like an allegory for aging and disease. And that's the moment when it turns into horror, when he's threatening. He's like, I am a monster.
Yeah.
I'm not just sick. I'm not just diseased. I'm not just ugly. There are parts of me that are really right now screaming inside of me to rip you to pieces and eat you. And I don't know how much longer I can control that.
You're right. Yeah. He goes on to say, I'm an insect who dreamt he was a man and loved it, but now the dream is over and the insect is awake. And he says, I'm saying I'll hurt you if you stay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Badass. That's cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you liked it. You loved it.
Yeah.
You were real into it. For me, I used to like it a lot. I loved this movie previously. I'm looking at my notes to make sure I don't miss anything. I do have one more big point I want to get to, but it can wait.
Me too. We've got time. I've got
we're grooving on this. I loved it. I didn't love it. I used to love it a lot more than I do now. Now I watched it and I'm like, it feels thin. And I think that a big part of that is the lack of cast. I think that's part of it. It does not feel like there's a world here. It feels like three people in a room in a bad way to me. Horror to me kind of depends on verisimilitude. Like in order for it to not feel like a fever dream, it needs to feel grounded in reality. It needs to have a connection to our world, and and the superficial elements of that I think are kind of important. Like it needs to feel like it's a real world. If it doesn't feel like a world that you could inhabit as a physical three-dimensional space, it can't actually, to me, horrify you. And this feels like almost like a black box theater. You know, like
it was thinking what you're saying. It does feel very theatrical. What element? I feel like part of her recording him is supposed to ground it in that reality. Like video exists, so this is happening.
No, let's see real life. Let's see normal life outside of the monster. Right? Outside of it needs more set pieces, it needs more locations, and it needs more cast, and it needs the characters to be seen doing things while advancing the plot, of course.
You know, the bar doesn't do that for you. You see her with the other boyfriend trying to make sense of the story.
We get the bar scene, the one kind of moment of, well, that's what I'm saying though, is like that there's no These characters have no other characters that they know of other than themselves, except for Tawny, who is really just a prop to demonstrate that he's a monster and what's up with him, and that he's just a victim, right? If she was a character earlier in the movie, if she was like a friend of the Gina Davis character, and he like turned his affections towards her or something like that, and she wasn't really, in the picture, right? Like she extends the Gina Davis character into a direction other than this tiny little triangle. Like all the characters feel very small. They feel like they have no interests outside of the people who are in the movie. It's like, look, I didn't like Dune. Here's an example. I don't know how to explain this in a better way. And I feel like Jeff Goldblum, like I can't express myself. Like I didn't like reading Dune because it felt like the characters had no interests outside of the story in Dune. It felt like the setting. There are millions and billions of people in this world, and they have all this technology, varying levels of technology, various worlds, various cultures. There's no, like, they didn't invent popular music. They didn't invent any form of entertainment except for maybe on Getty Prime. I think there's like pit fighting. There's no television. There's no sitcoms. It does not feel like all of the things that will, I believe, people will entertain themselves in more than one way. It wouldn't just be gladiatorial games. Like, I think that all of it feels thin despite being big. It feels like there actually isn't a world here to me. It does not feel lived in. It does not feel authentic. Star Wars feels more lived in and authentic. There's fucking jazz bands. There are patrons that, like, there's, you know what I'm saying? Like, it feels like other things are happening. This is what I'm getting at. It feels like other things are happening outside of the confines of this movie. It does not feel in this movie like the world outside of this triangle exists, that there are other people in the setting living lives, that there are movie theaters off screen showing movies down the street where people are hanging out. Like, that bar feels like it doesn't exist until the moment that Goldblum walks into it to some extent, and then it blinks out of existence when he leaves. The movie just feels thin to me. It doesn't feel like it has a whole world, and it feels thin. I don't know how else to explain it.
I hear.
Let her take. Sorry.
No, I hear you. I don't walk away with any of that. I guess.
Okay.
In the way that it's theater, I'm fine with just hyper focusing on this moment, this problem. That's okay for me. It would have never occurred to me that I needed more world.
It only occurred to me that that's what it was now. I had the vague sense. This is how this is how Greg operates. I was like, why does this movie feel thin? What is missing from it? There's something here that I'm not getting. What is it? And it was talking through that I figured out that's what it is. Thin. Keep calling it thin. It's got no meat on its bones. That movie. It feels low budget is what it feels like. It feels like they put a lot of money into Jeff Goldblum's creature effects, and they didn't have money for like an extra location or more days of shooting.
Yeah, but like if we leave this location, I just don't know what that serves exactly. Like it would feel disjointed. Like you go off just to prove that we're still in the world. Like for what purpose? I know we're in the world.
I don't. I don't feel like, yeah, it does. I mean, why, for what purpose? I think that
like with every movie you see, you need to be shown like you are living in the United States of America and here's what's happening now for the movie.
No, I don't need that. It just feels like it's missing for me in this movie in particular. I can't articulate why. Leave it alone. I don't like that part of it.
I mean, it might be a result of, and this is something I wanted to come back to. So in the, I think it was Psycho, we were talking about you brought up the 3 different kinds of horror. I found the quote. The quote was from Stephen King. What he exactly says is the 3 types of terror: the gross out, which is the sight of a severed head tumbling down a flight of stairs. It's when the lights go out and something green and slimy splatters against your arm. The horror is the unnatural: spiders the size of bears, the dead waking up and walking around. It's the lights go out and something with claws grabs you by the arm. And then the last one is terror, when you come home and notice everything you own has been taken away and replaced by an exact substitute. It's when the lights go out and you feel something behind you. You hear it. You feel its breath against your ear. But when you turn around, nothing is there. And so like this is the first, we've been doing a lot of horror through spooky season. And this is the first like disgust horror, the first body horror we've done. Everything else we've done is sort of terror, sort of life horror, the creeping thing, that the anxiety horror. And so I wonder if like disgust horror just happens to feel less worldly because you're focused on the body. You're focused on his fingernail peeling back, which is so effective, I think, for people because you can imagine what it's like for your fingernail to peel back. It's a much more close and like right here. The horror's around your head instead of out there.
I don't know. That could be it.
Once he knows he's merged with a fly, he knows what's happening to him. He knows his body is decaying. And now he's just going through the process. You're watching it happen. And there's no stopping it. And that's what's horrific. There's no...
Yeah, it's the inevitability. It's
Yeah.
the dread. It's dread is what it is. Or, yeah, whatever. I think dread is the one that goes with inevitability. Body horror could be, I know I'm going to turn into the monster. I know this is going to happen to my body. That's aging. and I can't stop it.
Which Cronenberg has said that this movie's... one of the
Aging.
things he said it was about was, disease and aging.
Right.
So.
I might turn into this thing, right? Like it's about known unknowns and
Yeah.
unknown knowns and known knowns and all that stuff.
Do you generally like body horror, disgust horror? Like one thing we watched The Society is the only other body horror we watched, and it's not an episode that ever aired because I don't.
That's true.
Yeah, so
It was poorly recorded. I don't know that body horror is a useful distinction as a subgenre of horror. I think that body horror elements crop up in all subgenres of horror, and there are effective uses of it and ineffective uses of it.
that is kind of Cronenberg's thing, though, is flesh body horror.
Yeah, and I think that he's not that great.
Yeah, okay.
I really like Videodrome, but it's not for the body horror. It's because of the conception of Dr. Oblivion and the concept, like the sci-fi elements of it are very interesting to me. The VHS Man is very interesting to me.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm unfamiliar with the movie, unfortunately.
It's great.
Yeah.
Like there are ideas in that movie that I think are fun to play with and interesting. The fact that he has a mouth in his stomach that holds a gun that shoots cancer to me is like, oh, that's okay. If that's what you're doing, David, I guess you really love spirit gum and cosmetics. Good for you. I don't really care about that. It could have just been a gun, you know, like it's not actually germane to the story in the slightest. So I don't know, like, you know, at the same time in Alien is a body horror film because it's about your own body being turned against you. It has elements of, you know, violating gender theory, right? Like your mental image of yourself as specifically to men, like it impregnates you, whether you're male or female. Like this is all in like a theory book I read about Alien. You know, the body horror elements there are much more effective to me than the elements in The Fly. And I can't quite, or certainly in Videodrome, which it's funny, like I guess it's a body horror film, but I never even occurred to me that it's a body horror film because that's not the cool part about it.
Yeah. Well, I think it's interesting though that this movie also, and maybe from a female perspective, it's why this one feels more affecting to me, is that like, you know, they put the abortion in there. They put your body being taken over and not being able to do anything about it.
Yes.
In the movie from her perspective, and it mirrors his experience.
Yep. And I'm glad you picked up on that because actually I read something where somebody broke down Cronenberg's filmography into his male period and his female period.
Oh, interesting.
And the body horror films that he did are his female period. And he has primarily, if not maybe even exclusively, female protagonists in those movies. And then, like, I guess not Crash. Crash might be the transitional point. Existenz isn't body horror in the slightest. It's body weirdness. But then certainly by History of Violence, you're in what they would have referred to as his male cinema theory period or something. I didn't disagree with it. I thought that sounded likely.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I think any themes about your body being taken over feels uniquely female, and then men trying to understand like what would that look like? What would that feel like? Like what is that?
If you were interested in understanding things.
Yes. But
Unlike
hopefully
me.
it breaks through even for those uninterested. Something in it sticks.
You know what was an effect? I'm thinking about the fingernail scene. This is so silly.
Yeah.
Specifically, you brought that up. I thought that, and I didn't really even like Black Swan, but I thought Black Swan did that scene more effectively.
Oh, well, and there is a theory about that too. Like watching someone pull back a hangnail can be so much more effective than watching a body explode because our brains can't really
It's relatable.
Imagine. Yeah, you can't imagine what it's like for your body to explode. And insofar as you can imagine it, it's kind of over after that point anyway. You don't have to deal with that pain or the fallout from it. It's done.
Yeah.
You peel back a hangnail, everybody knows what that feels like. And so I can't watch shaving in movies or film. I don't know.
Shaving of legs or faces? Because
Any shaving, either shaving.
Any shaving.
Yeah.
That might be a sensory issue.
It might be, but like I think of the Dexter. The Dexter opening kind of fixed this for me. It was like immersion therapy, seeing it over and over and over again the same way. But anytime someone would shave in a movie, I would have to like remove myself. The first time I ever shaved my legs, I cut myself very badly, and maybe that has something to do with it. Yeah. But this theory that like your experiences make things more frightening.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's true. And also like you pointed out too, like I think relatable. It's funny actually. We're talking about like body horror being relatable. War movies to me often have like relatable body horror. I was thinking about Black Hawk Down, and there's a scene in I think it's Black Hawk Down where a guy he's taking a shot or shrapnel through his lower half, you know, and you don't see the goriest of details, but it's implied that I think his femoral artery is cut and that his balls have been blown off and all this stuff. And there's like a futility in the moment of trying to save him, and you know, his bleeding out and everything. Like that to me is a serious horror. Body horror scene.
Like you feel that in your body.
Oh yeah. I mean, I truly it's interesting too. We could talk about that, the difference between empathy and sympathy. I actually empathize with that. Not that I can know what that's like, but I feel the feeling of that, or a version of that feeling of it. Sympathy would be, you know, me
understanding. You feel bad.
I feel bad for you.
Yeah.
I understand that you feel bad, and I will make allowances for that.
Yeah.
People accuse me of having no empathy. I don't think most people have any empathy at all. I think they just don't know what the word sympathy and empathy mean. But
you think most people don't have empathy, meaning if someone's experiencing a feeling.
Do you actually feel that feeling? Because that's what empathy is.
So sometimes I would say when someone loses a family member, or
you know what that's like because it's happened to you.
Yeah, exactly. So then yes, I would call that empathy more than sympathy. I have a moment of feeling, remembering my pain, feeling that pain with them, and then moving on.
People throw that around like they're synonyms. They're not.
Yeah.
It's kind of like jealousy and envy. Yeah, people think that jealousy and envy are the same thing. They're not. That's very important when you're reading Othello. You have to know the differences.
Right.
Jealousy is, I'm afraid you're going to take something I have. Envy is, I want something you have.
Yeah. I would imagine that people feel empathy more than sympathy. It's easier to feel empathy than it is to feel sympathy.
Oh, really?
Well, if you are feeling empathy, it means that you have something that's happened to you that you can relate it to. If you're feeling sympathy, then you're having to imagine somebody else's pain and make allowances for it.
I see what you're saying. No, I agree with that, because you're saying empathy is reflexive.
Yes.
So it's like, but it's less common. It's easier, but less common. It will happen to you whether you want to or not. It's like a reflex, right? Like you don't really have control over it, so it's easy.
Yeah.
Sympathy is learning how to not be an asshole.
Yeah.
Which is a different thing.
Like somebody comes to you and it's like, all these things happened to me today. I had the most terrible day. And you're just like, most of those things are probably things you can empathize with, but since they're not at that heightened level. Yeah, exactly.
You missed your cab. I hate when that happens.
Yeah, right.
Sure, you are empathizing, but it's we don't need to put a bullet next to it. It wasn't a real important moment of empathy.
Yeah, sure.
Your lunch was cold. Ooh, that's rough.
Yeah.
Moving on.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's interesting. I think that body horror, if it's successful, I think the reason people respond to it is that it makes them cringe. It makes them ugh.
Yes.
And
yes. When it clicks.
Anxiety horror makes you feel things as well, but not in the same sort of like you tingling through your body sort of way.
What's an example of like anxiety horror?
A movie that makes me feel deeply anxious.
Oh, okay. I'm glad you finished.
Makes me feel
this
deep.
This movie just makes me feel deep.
Hold on.
I feel very deep.
I
feel like I listen to Blue Note jazz and write beat poetry when I listen to this movie. That's how I feel.
It's so funny. Actually, so a movie that's coming to mind isn't horror at all, but it's a movie that Ray can't watch because they can't enjoy it because it makes them feel so anxious, which is Bridesmaids. You find like anxiety comedy and anxiety horror.
Wow. That's funny, man. I love Bridesmaids. I haven't rewatched it. I've seen it once, but I remember really enjoying it.
I love it too. I love it. But it's like,
Interesting.
it's all of these cringe, anxiety kind of can go together in that, where you're like, you see someone doing something that is embarrassing and you're like, oh, I can't watch this. I can't watch this. I can't watch this. But that's,
okay.
cringe
Got
and
it.
anxiety are different. That's not, no.
I can't relate to being embarrassed. I'm incapable of it.
Yeah.
That's why I'm on the
You are
camera.
pretty good at, yeah, you are pretty good at that. That doesn't, I guess Black Swan, you brought that one up. That's an anxiety movie.
I can sympathize with her anxiety around embarrassment. I know it's a thing.
There you go.
I'm sorry for her. I just don't have any relationship to it.
I remember
I
early
cannot
on.
remember the last time I was embarrassed.
Yeah, I remember early on in How to Drink, I was like, how do you cut yourself? And this is something I've gotten over with the podcast. But at that point, I was like, I don't think I could do that. And you're like, it does not bother me in the slightest. I never think about it. It blew my mind at the beginning of working on that.
For the record, we're talking about editing and not, did
I not say
cutting.
that?
You said, how do you cut yourself? It's just like, I just want to be very clear that we're not talking about coping mechanisms.
No,
we're talking about editing.
yourself. Yes, true.
People have asked me that a lot of times. And I'm just like, I can't comprehend why that would be difficult. I'm also really dissociative. I may not be very healthy.
You do have anxiety, though. You have anxiety around flying.
Yeah. I have a hard time calling that anxiety. I understand that it might, and the reason that I have a hard time with that is because I have so little experience with anxiety outside of that I may not be fully comprehending what the definition of anxiety is. I have like panic attack level, like, I guess you could call it an anxiety attack. To me, anxiety, when someone says, oh, I have anxiety, it sounds more chronic than acute. Like it's all the time, kind of generalized about everything, as opposed to, I am in terror, you know? But I mean, to be blunt, I don't know. Maybe that is the definition of anxiety, and everybody else is just with, generalized anxiety is walking around in abject terror, having full-on panic attacks 24 hours a day.
Yeah, I think some people are. Yeah.
Holy shit! How do you live like that?
Yeah. Here's one. Let's try this one. What about Bob? As far as like an anxiety-inducing movie,
that
being
induces
stalked.
a tremendous amount of anxiety.
Yeah, like I'm trying to think of a horror
I find that
movie.
movie hard to watch.
Yeah.
Yeah, I never want to watch that movie again, to be honest. It makes me insane. We should, though, because I truly, on rewatching it after not being a child, I was like, oh, this is actually a horror film.
Well, and is that
I am
because
horrified.
being followed or just having this problem you can't solve? Like, what about that is horrifying?
I'm going to use a term, and I believe I'm using it almost correctly, as correctly as you can use it in modern parlance. It's the gaslighting. It's the Dreyfus character knowing this man is crazy, and not just crazy, but dangerous crazy, and has inserted himself into our lives, not in a way that's just disruptive, but which is very threatening and very fucking dangerous, and being surrounded by your family, whom you cannot simply abandon and be like, I'm getting out of here. You guys, like, fuck y'all. This guy is crazy. He's going to kill somebody if I stick around, and not being able to remove yourself from that situation because you are shackled to these people who are convinced that there's nothing wrong. That to me is, I want to rip my flesh off and have my bones crawl out of me.
Yeah.
It's awful.
So there you go. That's effective. True gaslighting is terrifying. Is a terrifying notion.
I saw a TikTok that was talking about the times you're gaslighting people and you don't even know it. And I've decided that there exists a state of war between me and this psychology influencer who does not know I exist. So watch out, guy.
Strong,
but it was
a strong parasocial relationship happening here.
Parasocial, antisocial relationship.
Just because you don't think he's describing gaslighting.
I think he's gaslighting people about the definition of gaslighting. His definition of gaslighting, when you don't know that you're gaslighting people, is disagreeing with them.
Yeah.
Like, if somebody says, you said this the other day to me and it made me feel this, and you respond with, I didn't say that, you're gaslighting them. No, you're arguing.
Yeah. I don't think you
Gaslighting-
can really gaslight without knowing it.
You cannot.
Yeah.
It has
yeah.
to be intentional.
That's something else.
Yeah.
It might not be a nice thing. It might not be something you like, but yeah, it takes the meaning out of the word gaslighting and the intention out of gaslighting, which it shouldn't.
Your significant other parks the car in the driveway, and then in the middle of the night you get out and park it on the street in front of the house, and then the next morning when they say, what happened? Where'd you go last? What happened? I thought I parked the car in the driveway. What's going on? No, you parked it in the street. Are you okay? Oh, should we see a doctor? That's gaslighting.
Yes. My grandmother always told a story about like a couple friends of her and my grandfather, and the husband would take the woman's coat. They'd like go to a house, hang the coat in the coat closet. He would move the coat. And she would go to get her coat and be like, I swear I hung it in the coat closet. He'd be like, oh, honey, no, you hung it over on this chair over here. You don't remember that? And it was all a control thing. He was like,
that's crazy.
He was terrified that if she didn't feel completely dependent on him, she'd leave him. That was the example I remember. They had other examples.
That's a really good example of gaslighting.
Yeah.
Should we piss off the rest of the internet and attack weaponized incompetence, or have we already covered that one? Because that's another term I object to the common use of.
Does that piss off the internet to define gaslighting with intention and to call arguments?
Yes.
Everyone's trying to hurt you all of the time. Is that
if
why?
I self-identify as gaslit, I am gaslit. And if you tell me I'm not gaslit, you're gaslighting me. Gaslighting me. Yeah,
Sure.
Absolutely. At least the very vocal parts of the
that
internet.
takes all of the power out of the word.
Reality?
Yeah, it does. And to people who are actually being actively gaslit, I think it removes any power from those people to identify what is happening to them. Yeah.
It makes it absolutely, absolutely.
So I'm happy to piss off the internet in that instance.
I can't do this podcast anymore because the things that come out of my mouth, Meredith.
I don't think anyone's going to disagree with that. I think people get mad when you want people to feel stupid for liking something. I think that's it. That's it. Stay away from that and you're good.
How do you think I feel about people misusing the word gaslit, though?
Well, so that's different. They don't like gaslighting. It's not their favorite movie. It's not something they grew up with.
It is their favorite
and they feel...
affliction. It makes them feel so special that someone's doing that.
Maybe
to them.
we'll
See,
find out.
I did it. I did it.
Maybe you're right. Maybe we'll find out, and people will be like, "Well, actually."
Were you telling me that like you are just now waking up to like how tough life in the comments can be after seeing?
Yeah, I have a hard time feeling anything about comments, if that makes sense. I don't know. It doesn't stick with me. It doesn't tend to bother me, but I guess if someone came at me really hard, it might. I really enjoy comments and reading. Like when people have tidbits that we didn't discuss or didn't catch, or like a fact about the movie. I love that stuff.
That's great.
Yeah, I think what should we're never going to hit every fact. So if a conversation can start in the comments that takes our conversation deeper, I don't feel like, oh, don't tell me like that I missed something. I don't care. That's great. That's wonderful. I'm glad you know things.
Greg has no empathy and it makes me not like him, followed by people agreeing with them. You like that one?
Yeah, I guess people do come at you a little harder than me. But...
Where's their empathy? What the fuck? For the record, if you're actually accusing me of having no empathy, you're saying I have a real, actual neurological condition, and it's very fucking ableist of you to attack me for it.
I think that people have a very strong reaction to being told not to like something, or that liking something is stupid.
I don't realize that that's what I say, but okay.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if that
comes off that way.
I think it can. Yeah. I think like if you say anything that sort of touches that, then anything else you say is gone, because that's all people are going to hear.
Skin's so thin.
I tend to agree with you. I mean, I like these.
Obviously, we would never be able to do
this.
Yeah,
we wouldn't. Like you, I mean, Buffy is a perfect example. You really don't like Buffy. You really don't like Joss Whedon.
Yeah, I don't like the way he writes dialogue.
Yeah, and a lot of guys don't. It's like specifically like a thing that guys really like to not like Joss Whedon.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, wow. I've never encountered that. Are you sure you're just not remembering, this is me gaslighting you, a lot of conversations I've had with you?
No. I had a good friend in Florida. He felt the same way. His writing was very similar to Joss Whedon's, ironically. And when I would point that out to him, nothing could make him more furious. But
that's funny.
I do think a point that you've brought up is that he isn't the feminist that he purports to be in his writing, and that bothers you.
Yeah.
And I do think there's validity to that.
Well, wasn't he outed as a creeper?
Well, so one of the big things he's done is that, like, wow, we are so off. We were talking about like Joss Whedon, but Charisma Carpenter.
That's okay. I'm gonna bring it back around.
Yeah.
In a second
Okay.
here
Great. One of the things I hate about him is when Charisma Carpenter, who plays Cordelia on Buffy, was on Angel and got pregnant. He like gave her a really hard time about it. He basically wrote her off the show, and that negates anything that he's ever said about being on the side of women or being a feminist. And that's not the only time. That's just the one that I am the most familiar with. That
I've heard he was pretty. I mean,
he could be an asshole. Yeah,
I've heard he could be pretty abusive, and I might be I might be quoting reality wrong, and I admit that.
I think that most directors, writers, and actors can be and are.
Yeah.
So I mean, for me, Buffy is a character that like changed my world. It allowed for women, you didn't have to. A thing that happens a lot with women who are successful in stories is they give up being mothers, they give up being girly, they give up these things about them. And Buffy didn't give up anything to be strong, to be a hero. Things were taken from her over time. Her innocence was taken from her over time, but she didn't have to bury any part of herself to be strong. And it was just the first hero that I had in my life that did that. It allowed,
I love that,
for both of those things. So he did that very well, whether that was all him or people who worked with him or that. But that's the great thing about movies and films. It's combinations.
It's collaborative.
Of people. Yeah.
I always said I think that in his case it was fetishism, not feminism.
Possibly.
Yeah. I think that there was like a quote that really set me off when he was like, got excited in an interview, and he was like, I want my magical samurai girl to come save me. And it was like, ooh, there's something weird about that. I think I can finally put my finger on it. Mm-hmm. I'll bet it's a very good metric for this one. Mm-hmm. Nothing's perfect, but I'm going to bet on this. Here it is. It is an intentional choice for a creative person, a person who is famous for their creations, whom is male, to appeal to young, particularly nerdy women. That does not happen by accident. If you're Chris Hemsworth, women love you because you're hot, and there's not a goddamn thing you can do about that except stop being hot. But if you intentionally go to conventions and you intentionally cultivate an audience of women, and it's not because you're hot, I'll bet that guy's a creep. I'll bet.
I understand that point of view. Where I would push back is that...
Give it time. It's going to happen.
Yeah. I think, unfortunately, that's true of... well, no, I'm not going to finish that statement. But writing for women, and I think this is an unfortunate thing, throughout history, there haven't been a lot of women telling their own stories. So we have to rely on some men to try and understand women's stories, to tell our stories for us, which is changing now, slowly, much more slowly than people like to think. People think that people won't watch things about women. So they're not going to give women the opportunity to make stories. So you have to rely on a man who's allowed to make stories, to make something about a woman, to prove that it can make money, opening the door for women to write their own stories.
That's probably true.
Yeah.
The way I'm thinking about it is in Animal House. It's the guy with the guitar on the stairs at the frat party. Mm-hmm. That fucking guy sucks. Every dude on Earth knows that guy fucking sucks. And every dude on Earth can see that guy for what he is. He's a fucking creep. Mm-hmm. And the galleys sitting around him, listening to him strum his guitar on the staircase can't tell it. You need to have Bluto come in and smash it.
Yeah.
And I think that the Whedons of the world are the same guy. They're the guys who are women's studies to meet chicks, man. You know, like, guy sucks, man. I guarantee. I mean,
I don't
there's going to be
disagree with you.
exceptions.
I don't
but
disagree with you in his personal life.
It's a huge red flag.
Yeah.
Huge red flag that so far has yet to steer me wrong.
Yeah.
It has made me a lot of enemies who hated me for years when I've been like, this guy doesn't speak to you the way you think he's speaking to you. And then I'm generally right.
Yeah. Good. Yeah. The only way for me to elaborate upon this feels like I'm just like shitting on men, which I don't want to do.
Go
So,
ahead.
no, I'm not going to do it.
No. I shit on therapy. You can shit on men. Come on, get in the mud with me. Let them come for you in the comments too. Don't let me martyr myself alone out here.
I don't want to speak completely in generalizations. I have a lot of great men in my life, but I do think that usually when I see like a male celebrity go down or someone, you find out someone's disappointing, my thought is always like, you're always being lied to. There's always, here it is. Here's what I'm thinking. It's always an ulterior motive. And so when I meet men in particular, I'm always in the back of my brain, what's really happening? Are they being nice just to like placate me? Are they being nice for other reasons, whatever? And then years after knowing someone, I can get over that. But being honest, my guard is up for a really long time, particularly when it comes to straight men. And I feel I have a very justified reasoning for that. And when I see women fall in love quickly, I tend to be like, oh no, you haven't seen that person yet.
That sucks.
But then, you know,
not that like you're wrong. I'm saying that sucks to live in that world.
Yeah, but the reason
I am sympathizing.
The reason I don't want to do that is, and like sometimes what drives me nuts in the comments when people want to like come for you being like a bad guy or whatever is like, I would spend hours alone in a basement with you while you were very drunk. And never in any of those moments was I ever like, oh God, Greg's going to reach a point of drunkenness where he's going to start to get annoying. He's going to start to say like flirty stuff, like blah, blah, blah. Yeah, no. And I don't know if I can express to you how rare that is. I think that is because you do have empathy. Like you understand that that's uncomfortable and it's mean and it's you abusing power, so you don't do it. Maybe you're just, that's not who you are with anybody. I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't trust myself to do that analysis on myself. I don't trust people to know themselves. I think that you are the sensor sensing thyself, and your ability to perceive yourself is more flawed than anything. I fucking hate it when doctors are like, rate your pain on a 1 to 10. I always like then have to explain to them what I interpret the 1 to 10 scale to mean. And like, well, a 10, I'm not speaking because the pain has physically shut my brain down and I blacked out. And a 1 is no pain at all. I'm at a 4, which is a lot of pain because 10 is death.
Yeah, sure.
I just want to be clear because most people are coming in there and saying, I'm at a 10. And it's like, you need 2 Tylenol.
Yeah, right.
I come from Dungeons and Dragons. I come from AD&D when the stat block is the complete, from 3 to 18 represents the entire spectrum of the possible birth conditions of a human being, where a 3 strength means that you don't really have enough strength to inflate your lungs. So when you say 10, I'm thinking the limits of what pain a human could endure. Yeah. You're a head on a table enjoying its last breath.
I relate to that. I felt I had to stop in my 3rd trimester allowing women to tell me their birth stories or reading birth stories.
Oh.
For a very similar reason. It's that everyone wants to tell you ranging from, oh, it's not that bad, you'll be fine, to this will be the worst experience of your life. You'll be traumatized forever.
Absolutely. And how was it? Are you traumatized?
No, I wasn't. But okay. I would never, people want to tell everybody that what they're about to experience is going to mirror what they have experienced. And it just,
of course,
everything is different based on pain tolerances, the amount of pain you've already felt in your life. If you've broken a leg, that's probably going to change how you react to giving birth. It will, because you've experienced some level of pain before.
Yep.
What I now, being a person who has given birth, would say to anyone who's pregnant is do not allow anyone to tell you their birth story unless you find that comforting. That's fine.
Yeah.
Because there is no preparation. There is no way to understand what's about to happen to you.
Yep.
You just
Why would you allow someone else's experience to color yours?
Well, or to make you afraid. And some women really they think they're preparing you. They want to mentally prepare you. So they're going to tell you how horrible it's going to be, thinking that that's going to
It's
somehow...
an instinct to center themselves in your story. I'm sorry. I don't want to be cynical. I am going to be cynical. That's what it is.
The pain scale thing for me is just like you cannot relate your pain to somebody else's pain.
I
logically.
love when I go to my neurologist and we have to do like an update on my epilepsy symptoms. And I should probably actually keep a spreadsheet, because like when I'll be like, yeah, you know, sometimes I feel like this. I'm feeling like a little dissociative, or actually I get jamais vu, which is the reverse of déjà vu, which is fucking weird if you've ever had that one. It is super dissociating. It like destroys any moment that you happen to be currently existing in. It is the sensation of suddenly like this is brand new and I've never been here before. And in the middle of a conversation, it will be the emotional experience of, hey, my mouth's been talking.
Oh, weird.
oh God, this is happening. But of course it has been happening. It's just the feeling of that. Ooh, I'm here. Oh. And so like, it'd be like, oh, how long has that been happening for? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know that I noticed it the first time it happened. What if the first time it happened, I was driving and I wasn't talking to anybody? It could have been happening for years. I am an imperfect censor of my own experience. I don't, and that to me is, and they're like, they must be like, God damn it, this fucking asshole.
Yeah.
Why is he so, like, I strive for this objectivity about myself, and it's an impossible target, right?
Yeah.
So you're talking to a doctor, you want to give him useful information. I promised I would bring it around. Can I bring it around?
Yes, please. I was just going to say, we need to find our way out of this.
So the reason I want to bring it around, and I'm so glad we got on to creep dudes, is I believe that Jeff Goldblum has never stopped playing the character of Seth Brundle. And if you look at his work, and I did a little bit, I haven't seen all of the movies he's done before this, but like, for example, it jumped out at me when I watched the 79 version of Invasion of the Body Snatchers. He is nothing like Jeff Goldblum as you come to understand him, right? And he has progressively become more Jeff Goldblum, the Jeff Goldblum character, the entire time he's been acting. But primarily it seems to be, it originates in The Fly. The halting, what I think, and like the slight weird tempo and the heightening of this syllable over that one and stuff like that. I think it was a performance that he created for this character, and that this was kind of a breakthrough role for him, because I think the only really big movie before this that he was sort of featured in to some extent was The Big Chill. And even there, I never saw that, but I don't know that he's the primary character. And he's in... Anyway, he's not like the main character in Snatchers either. And I think that this was like a breakthrough, and it became kind of what he was known for on one hand. And I think it was a comfortable place for him. And I think he liked the way people responded to that guy. And I think he has just stayed that guy forever, ever since. And other actors do that. Like I saw an interview with Christopher Walken, exactly, who, he was like, you know where it comes from? I was doing auditions and I wasn't getting the role. And I decided maybe they don't know who I am. And I just said, I'm going to do the weirdest fucking shit I can. And it stuck. And I got the role. And I thought, well, that worked. So I'll do that again. And now that's who I am.
Yeah.
Like, I am that guy, Like, that's not the way I would talk normally. And I think that other actors are doing that as well. Like, they're playing the part that they invented for themselves to get the parts in the movie. The thing with Goldblum is that for a while, when the Me Too stuff was winding down a little bit on the internet, I did see some rumors and whispers around the internet about him being a little too touchy-feely.
Yeah.
And a little too aggressive.
Yeah.
Around younger ladies on set. And the performance of the Jeff Goldblum character reminds me very much of a teacher who taught at SVA while we were there. There's just a very similar vibe in them, and I can't quite explain it. It's this very disarming, non-threatening, unassuming guy on the staircase with the guitar character that kind of puts me off and sets off red flags. I honestly hope that Jeff Goldblum is a perfectly cool guy and that none of that is true. But it's just an observation about the fact that I don't think you know who Jeff Goldblum is. I don't think you see him at all in interviews. I think you see a very, like, I don't think that the guy that people love as Jeff Goldblum, that befuddled, strange fashionista grandpa man, it's a mask he pulls off when he gets home at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's a character.
I think he peels it off like Patrick Bateman
Yeah.
in American Psycho.
I think if I had that level of fame, I would also create a character. I don't know. I feel like
It might be necessary. It might just be how
Yeah.
it works.
because of all the trouble you get into too when you speak off the cuff, when you show people
Oh,
another
yeah.
side of yourself that they don't expect. That
We're
is
coming back now
interesting.
to my favorite topic, the resurrection of Chevy Chase. I think he just refuses to play a character when he's not playing a character. I just think he's like a regular guy who's like prickly. Like
Yeah.
he's just like us. That's what I think.
And when you see snippets of that, right, it's going to come across.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's what I think. I've seen interviews with him where he's like a perfectly congenial gentleman.
Yeah.
You know? And I think sometimes he's got bad days and he's not wearing a mask and fuck it. I'm not always the nicest fella.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing is when you're caught off guard in public, some people are just not good at that.
It's actually aloof is it.
Yeah.
It's definitely something you have to acclimate to. The first couple times it happened to me was very jarring. And now it's cool.
It's happened to me once in Alaska. I got into a Lyft driver's car and
They
he
knew
told
you from our show.
Yeah, this was in the height of when I was like regularly on
show.
episodes of How to Drink. This was like
Wow.
right as that was happening, and he said, he said, "You look familiar to me," and was kind of smiling, and I was like, "Oh," and I was like joking because I'd been to Alaska once before, like years
Right.
before, and I was like, "But you probably wouldn't remember me from that," and Ray was like, "Babe, he probably watches How to Drink." I was like, "Oh, do you watch How to Drink?" And he was like, "Yes." And I was like, "Oh, okay." Completely. It never even
That's
crossed my mind
so-
in the top 5 reasons.
Yeah, I mean, there's something about the Alaska. I mean,
Yeah.
of course, the internet's everywhere. It's the Alaska part
Yeah.
that in my brain is like, wow, that's crazy. But of course, it's not. It's the same everywhere. Person on the internet, man, Brennan, when we went out to dinner the night that he filmed with us,
I
somebody was like,
remember
the server was like, I feel like I know you from somewhere. And his response was, I'm a person on the internet. I love that.
She was like, I
man.
know. Yeah, she knew who he was, but was too scared to just come out and say it. Yeah, wow.
When I used to live in Highlands, I was a bit heavier, and Highlands
Kevin
is
Smith.
Kevin Smith's home
Yeah.
turf, and there was a sushi restaurant we used to go to, and the waitress, she was like, you know, you look a lot like Kevin Smith. And honestly, I was deeply offended because I was like, God damn it, I'm not that fucking heavy. Jesus Christ. But I was trying to be polite and give her an out, you know? And so I was just like, oh, yeah, well, I mean, I'm not. I mean, I get that a lot. I guess I look like him, but, you know, so that, you know, you don't feel weird is what I'm thinking. Like, of course, people mistake me for Kevin Smith all the time. And I saw this look in her eyes come over her, and my like attempt at being polite and giving her the exit clearly backfired, because in that moment I could see her deciding, oh my God, this is definitely Kevin Smith and he's trying to be incognito. And she just like was so nervous the entire time we were there because she was young. We had to stop eating there. We couldn't. And
Oh
like
my
it would
gosh,
happen
she just
repeatedly.
didn't
I was like,
believe
no,
you.
we're done. She just could not be made to convince. I could be wrong. You know, this is the version of the story I'm choosing to tell. I don't know, but like there was
Yeah.
definitely a turn in her eye, and my wife agrees too.
You're talking yourself out of the asylum. The more you said you weren't, the more you were.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I was about to tell another story and relate a story to myself from
got
my
a
own
whole
story,
other
but we'll save it
episode.
for another day.
Save
Yeah, we
it
got to
for
go.
that.
All right.
All right, so this is the
Oh,
fly.
takeaways from the movie. You
Yeah.
liked it a lot.
I did. And I find Goldblum to be very charming in the second half of this movie.
Wait, in the second half?
Yeah.
When he's a monster?
Yes. As
When
he-
his flesh is falling off and he's like a part puppet?
I think it's instead
We should
of
have unpacked that a lot more.
well, instead of just being like freaked out and sad and scared, he's funny. He deals with it with humor.
Oh.
We did talk about this.
Yeah. Okay,
and
okay.
I
He's brave.
or just curious, and like he dives into his science part of his brain, and I really liked this movie for that in particular.
Okay. I'm not going to say that I hated it. I just felt like it was not as strong as I had remembered it being. It felt a little thin, and it left me kind of like, okay, that's all. You know?
Yeah.
The Fly.
The Fly. Oh, one more thing.
Okay. One more thing.
Do you
Now
realize
it's your fault.
The whole reason any of this happens is because he's trying to come up for a solution for getting car sick. Did you catch that?
Yes. Yes.
It's like
That's true.
when you watch Big Lebowski, it's like everything happens because someone pissed on his rug.
Yes.
Yeah, there you go. That's it.
Thank you guys for listening and watching Midnight Local. It is available on the YouTube at youtube.com/midnightlocal. It's available wherever you get your podcasts. We do it both ways, and we like it both ways. So swing how you like to do, ding-a-ling. I tried to make that as sexual as I could. Did I succeed?
A little bit. I mean, it's a very sexual movie, so you gotta stick with the vibes.
Yes. There is a lot of extremely sweaty Goldblum sex in this movie. And we'll leave it on that.